Welcome to my presentation on population density, and it may not seem at first to be the most fascinating topics, but actually there's a lot behind it in terms of populations just being essentially human beings and where they choose to live, what they choose to do with their lives, whether they choose to be around massive communities of other humans or try and work on their own, and how that affects their lives. So it can be an extremely interesting topic, and as we'll find out, it affects things like culture and community and music and economics. So it's when you delve into these things, it matters far more than it first appears, I find. So first of all, what are the main factors that affect population density? Well, some of them are really quite basic, like just natural resources. So if an area of land, if you were living, say, 5,000 years ago, or even 1,000 years ago, and you were the mayor of a town, and you were trying to found a new town, create a new town, inevitably you'd want to go where there's wood to build stuff, where there's probably where there's a river, so you can get fresh water. So natural resources is the most obvious thing in the world to do. Another thing you might think of is hang on a minute, I'm going to need some food. So we're going to need some farms, and we're going to need some areas to have, our cattle or pigs or whatever, to have grass or something. So we're going to want, what's good for farmland? Well, fertile soil on flat land, that's pretty good for farms, for agriculture. So we'll have that as well. And then you also, maybe you've come from an area which was really hot or really cold, and you're thinking, to make my town, I'm going to want a temperate climate. And temperate just means kind of not too much rain, not too much heat, not too much humidity, just kind of in the middle, really. A bit like Britain's weather. So you want a temperate climate. And also, you might, if you're an individual rather than the town mayor, if you're one of the villagers who's following this guy, you might think, wait, am I going to go to this town, or am I going to go to another one? What's going to affect your decision? Well, what's going to affect it is how many jobs are in this new town. What sort of livelihood can I make? So jobs and wealth is going to affect where you go. If I just make this box a bit smaller. So on the other hand, if you are in a place you don't so much like, what's going to make you leave? What are the types of things that is going to make you leave? Well, I mean, the obvious one for me would be if there's extreme temperatures, extreme climate or temperatures. Really hot or really icy cold. That's going to just stop you doing so many things. It's going to stop you building, stop you farming, stop you. It's going to be not many people around, so it's going to be hard to make a business. All this stuff is going to make it harder. So you can imagine that the population is far less dense. There's far fewer people if there are extreme climate or temperatures. In the same way, if you think about the Amazon, dense, what should we say? Dense, not forests, but dense vegetation. Vegetation. Is that how you spell vegetation? Dense that's going to stop you because, as far as I know, there's not that many people in the Amazon compared to along the coast. There's like far fewer people, and that's because it's just hard to build land when there's so much jungle around you. So dense vegetation is going to stop you. Extreme climate, extreme temperatures. Now, there's a picture that could show you this 1,000 times better than I can. And it's a picture of Africa. And when you see this, you'll kind of know what I mean. This explains population density far better than I can. You see, the Sahara Desert, which is just this vast stretch of white yellow here, that is why it's, devastatingly hot. And there's so few people. The red, by the way, is just where people have kind of accumulated, and the darker it is, the more people. But you can see the Sahara's got so few people. But if that's kind of obvious, well, yeah, in the desert there's going to be few people. Where are there people? And you can see they've gravitated to certain areas, and it really demonstrates all the things I'm talking about. First, natural resources. So if you look, two main areas kind of show natural resources. One, Lake Victoria in Tanzania. If you see that lake there, it's surrounded by kind of thick red. So people have kind of gravitated to where the water is, because that's going to feed feed them and help them grow crops and feed their cattle and allow them to have food and easy transport as well. When there's lots of lakes and rivers, you can build canals and irrigation, and you can transport yourself everywhere. So it's more than just wealth. So natural resources. Another natural resource, if you see the Nile up here, dense red. It's just, it provides so much water and transportation, and even I think now, for quite a long time, energy. I think there's a dam around the bottom of the Nile, which creates a ton of energy for Egypt. So natural resources has a massive effect, and you can see that in just how dense it is around the Nile, and just how not dense, how sparse it is in the other areas of Egypt. Now, you can also see how wealth, once areas of accumulated wealth, how that's affected where people come. If you obviously realise that Europe is quite a wealthy place, relatively speaking, and you can see how in North Africa the populations have become incredibly dense around the coastline facing Europe, because there's far more opportunities for trading in the Mediterranean, all sorts of things like that. So wealth really does affect, and the possibility for jobs really does affect where people live. Now, if I go to a bit more general point, apart from these geographic features, population density. I'll change colour. Different colour to that. Population density. It affects innovation and ideas and progress, because if you imagine a small community just living, in the desert, or in the fringes of the desert, if you invent something, if you invented a Macintosh 2,000 years ago in the middle of a desert, chances are you're not going to be able to kind of pass that on to your sons and daughters and to other communities, because there's just not enough communication. There's not enough people around you to kind of absorb and share that idea with. But if you live in a dense city full of travellers from miles and miles away, and traders, if you invent something, that's going to catch on. You're going to make money from it, and it's going to get shared around the country and then the continent. So population density has affected human progress, throughout history. It's affected the promulgation of ideas and inventions for thousands and thousands of years. And just a quick last point, it also affects things like culture and music. If you think of the differences between urban music and country music, just population density affects the sounds that these musicians make, because they realize what their audience is. So it even affects things like acoustics. They actually change their music. The music evolves in different ways, in different locations, due to things like population density. So population density is about far more than just a kind of abstract geographic term. It's about humanity and human progress. So I hope that helps.